Hey everyone, I'm Lebo Madubanya and welcome back to the CLN Podcast. That's Career Launch Network. Now today we're talking about education, AI, and preparing for careers that don't even exist yet. Now, if you worry that technology will one day take away your future job before you even graduate, well, this is the episode for you. Joining me to discuss this is Tania Tryon, an expert in school leadership and education change. We'll look at new opportunities that AI is creating and how you can be ready for the future. But before we get right into our conversation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. Give me one misconception about AI.
AI doesn't need human instruction, that the human connection is not required, because it can be used to assist. It can be used to enhance our teaching. But currently, we just sit with the fear of, well, has the child used AI? You can't be an educator if you're not going to be open to being a continuous learner. Ultimately, as I say, it's here to stay.
Now, if you worry that technology will one day take away your future job before you even graduate, well, this is the episode for you. Joining me to discuss this is Tania Tryon, an expert in school leadership and education change. We'll look at new opportunities that AI is creating and how you can be ready for the future. But before we get right into our conversation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. Very important discussion. Tania,
Yes.
welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very important podcast, because when you talk about AI, education, careers of the future, it seems bleak almost at the moment, because of how we are measuring how education is evolving, or it's evolving within the frame of AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. But what's going to be the defining factor is who's using it well, because it is going to be part of most of our jobs one day. And one big differentiating factor will be those who learn and use it as a tool to assist and help themselves and better whatever job they're doing, and those that don't. So it's almost a case of you have to get on board with the AI. It's not going anywhere. And if we just want to put our heads in the sand and say, well, you know what, I'm not going to teach with it or use it, I don't think you're actually being realistic. Our kids are using it.
True.
The thing is, are we as educators, do we know how to use it well? Because ultimately, the basis of AI is not going to replace humans. It's not going to replace all of the things that are needed, especially in education, but it is going to become a critical tool. So instead of us being afraid of it, we need to learn how to use it to enhance and improve our teaching.
Okay, let's take it back, all the way back to your experience within the education landscape, leadership, education. You're passionate about it.
Yes.
So what would you say is the biggest concern for you in today's education system, and what still excites you about education?
Yes. My biggest concern is that we are too compliance heavy. We are not keeping up with where the world is at. We're not keeping up with where the kids are at. If we don't start integrating those things into our teaching, if we don't start making the teacher central to how AI is used in the classroom, we are going to be left behind, especially in the education factor. And usually what happens in the education is that they always catch on things way too late.
It's such a South African thing, though.
Yes, we are always way too late after damage has been done, and then we try to go back and fix that. But a big part of that is because we don't upskill our teachers to be able to use that. We still go back to, come on, let's be compliant. And the primary problem with that is this. Instead of the teacher who knows how to use AI well and is using it now, that teacher or those teachers should be the ones mentoring and helping the others. But instead, they are left out. They are not the ones presenting. When we have our meetings, when we discuss every quarter how things are going, it's not the best that are presenting. So people are teaching the way they were taught.
Absolutely.
And if I was taught poorly, and if I was taught that children must sit down and be quiet and listen to what I say, and they've switched off in 5 minutes, well, then that's how the content is then presented. And yet, sitting in the room are talented teachers that should be part of it, should be encouraged to say, hey, I've come to your school, I've seen your lesson, I see how well you do it. Guess what? At our next workshop, you come and present. You come and show us and integrate it. Because to be honest, a lot of teachers, yes, you will always get those that are hesitant.
Yeah.
Yes, you will always get those that are not interested in moving with the times. But there's also a lot that are, and they are being sidelined. And they are not getting the exposure where we take the best and we show everyone this is how a good lesson is done, because it can be used to assist. It can be used to enhance our teaching. But currently, we just sit with the fear of, well, has the child used AI?
True.
How am I going to catch them out?
That's the least of our problems,
That's
in fact.
the least of the problems. How well do you know it? How many teachers should be using it and do use it to help them with their own administrative duties? But hence, the way assessment is set out is one of the biggest problems. It's because assessment is set out with that verbatim type of teaching where I can upload my questions, put it onto AI, and it gives me the answers.
Yeah.
So a big problem is the way in which we assess. And universities are trying to get on this.
Yes,
and they
yes.
are trying to change the way they assess to say it needs to be diversified. You need to have different types of questions, because ultimately, if your students can just upload their assignment and put it through AI, then is the problem the student or is the problem the person administrating, giving the assessments?
So where would you start to make the relevant changes?
I would start to, if I would start to make the relevant changes, I would start right at the roots, right at the grassroots level. Let's get the strong teachers. Let's locate the talent, because it's there. And the problem people love to say is the usual lament of, well, I don't have any resources at my school, so what are you talking to me about AI?
Yeah.
But from my own personal experience, I have taught hybrid. And that started during COVID, where I was struggling to cover the content in class because I wouldn't get extended time to re-explain stuff. So what I did is I got the online platform and I slowly encouraged the learners to go on it. And what I realized was a lot of people sort of said, well, that's never going to work. Nobody has access to airtime or Wi-Fi.
True.
But guess what? If the content is uploaded, most people can usually access it at some point.
Yes.
Even if it's not that day.
Yes.
Maybe on Saturday, maybe on Sunday. And I found that a lot of learners actually learn that way. They don't want to read notes in a book.
No.
Because when they want to learn something, they go onto YouTube and watch a video. And then you want to teach the content in a completely different way. And so there is a space for it. And I think what we're missing is the creativity to say, guys, let's get the people who know how to do this. Let's get the teachers who are being innovative and let them show us how it can be, instead of just plainly saying, no, that will never work. We don't have any resources.
And from your perspective, what opportunities has AI created for the students that we might not be seeing? All we're seeing now is I put my assignment into AI chat, it changes.
But a lot of kids are using AI to help them explain what the teacher couldn't explain. So I explain a concept in class.
Yes.
A child goes home and says, please explain this to me as a 12-year-old learning this X or Y subject. So again, there's an opportunity. Why is it that when I'm not planning, why am I not going and using AI to see how it explains it and incorporating that into my teaching instead of leaving the two things separate? Because ultimately, as I said, it's here to stay. Years ago, people were scared of the calculator. They thought kids will never add or be able to do mathematics, but it's just a tool. And we just need to learn how to use it effectively.
And what careers do you think will emerge in the future, AI-driven, that we are not seeing at the moment?
I think a lot of careers going forward is going to go on how well can you collaborate, critical thinking, being able to diversify, being able to take what you know and adapt it to a different situation. EdTech, educational technology, digital literacy, communications, careers like that, I think are where, the future is going. But I think the important thing is how are we then getting the kids ready for that?
Yes. And how are we getting the kids ready for that?
Well, currently we're not. And to be quite honest, I don't think we're doing nearly enough to get them ready, if I was to be honest. But that doesn't mean we need to leave it there. Why can't we address the matter and try to see how we can bring our learners up? But I'm going to say something that sounds maybe a little bit unconventional.
Yeah.
But, kids can't learn if they don't feel psychologically safe. And before you teach any content, I don't care what subject it is. If you don't know your children, if you don't connect with them, if you don't make them feel safe to learn, to try, to make mistakes, to ask critical questions. Because what we currently do is, at home, kids ask critical questions, we lambaste them. We kind of write it off. And at school, when I, as a teacher, am not comfortable with you asking me such an in-depth question, I then do that again. I lambaste you. I tell you, listen, you don't ask those kind of things, just stick to the rules.
Yeah.
And it starts right there. Because if I get to know you, if you feel safe in my space, we can start having those conversations. We can start talking about these things and knowing, okay, you know what works for my kids? Context, context, context. Because there's no two classrooms that are the same. And there's no two kids that come to school in the exact same mood, in the exact same state of mind.
But the teachers are going to tell you that's not their job, because that's what I've heard now.
Yeah.
It's not my job to find out if Thomas and Balisa is okay or not. They almost want to get into class. They've got their textbooks. This is what they must follow. This is what they must teach. And that's it.
It's very sad, because what you're doing there is just disconnect.
Yeah.
So is this a career? Or is this a job? Is this just a means to an end? And unfortunately, in every career, there will always be those different types of people. There will be those people that see things as a means to an end, but there'll be those that see connection. And the interesting thing is, and I always tell my learners this, you will never remember what I've taught you, but you will always remember how I made you feel and how you felt in my presence. That's what lasts. And with that comes actually the learning.
That's true. That's
when you're able to feel comfortable to ask the questions, to engage, to talk about AI, to ask them, how are you using it? This is how I use it, and actually have open, honest conversations.
Do you think that education is experiencing its greatest technological disruption?
Absolutely, because we are way behind.
As South Africans,
if you look at the content in the textbook, it's for the most part, it's extremely outdated.
Yes.
And it's not relevant. And so what happens is that there's this disconnect between how the kids learn in life, the fact that they can go on their phones and order food or look up something or find out something, and then at school, it's the exact opposite. We still say to them, kids, design a poster on paper. But nobody does that. Everyone's going to use Canva. Yes, they still do that. And yet, if I went into a digital career and I was being creative, it would be a Canva sort of, some type of tool that I use to develop my content. So again, it's so far behind that I'd almost say AI is probably the least of the things that it has that should actually be updated and taken forward.
I don't want to ask you the question. I'm going to post it, and then you'll answer later. Where do you see the future of South African education then, if there's such a huge disconnect? Because you still can't be having a project here. You've got a project to go and draw a globe of the world. But think on that one, because I want you to give advice to a grade 10 learner. What sectors would you encourage them to explore at the moment?
I would say to a grade 10 learner now, yes, I would look at the digital literacy, communications, look at financial literacy, look at the way in which content is being conveyed to people. But more importantly, I would say to a grade 10 learner, use what you have now. It's not about waiting for optimal conditions. It's about initiative. It's about going on an online course. It's about researching something. Use what you have, and from there, take it from there. Because our attitudes will determine, ultimately the success. And if we constantly look and say, well, woe is me, I don't have optimal things. I don't have optimal conditions, so I'm not going to succeed. Well, then you won't. But if I go with the mindset of this is what I have, and I'm going to make do with it and grow from there. So that kind of mindset is very, very important. Those kind of values are what we need to instill in our kids, so that when they're out there in the world, they can adapt. They can work with others. They can think critically. They can take positive, criticism and learn to engage, because that is the working world they're going in. And we need to sort of encourage that and talk about it and engage with that at school level.
Do you think our subjects for our students are adequate to prepare them for the future and the careers of the future? So back in my time, it was your biology. There were students that did home economics.
Yes.
And others were doing wood. I don't know what the subject was for the woodwork guys.
Yes, but I know what you mean.
Yeah,
yes.
So, and we looked down on them, right? But in today's world, you're paying 1,800 Rand for your plumber to come and assess the damage in your house.
I believe strongly in that. And that's because, a lot of the work that I've done has looked at school-based support team. That, in other words, means identifying learners with barriers, taking them through the departmental process for them to be placed in schools that are adequate for them. And you won't believe, one of the hardest challenges I would have is not with the placing of kids, even though the process is very, very long, but with the attitude of the parents. If my child goes to a skill-based school,
they think less.
Is my child less of?
Oh.
And that I feel so passionate about, because at the end of the day, there are kids studying at UJ. There are kids studying all over who have gone to these skill-based schools. And people are just not knowledgeable enough about the fact that the skill-based school has got variations. There are people doing some academic subjects with only 1 or 2 technical subjects. There are others that are only doing the technical subjects.
But wait, do we not know enough perhaps? Because it's the first time I'm hearing of a skill-based school within grade 8 to grade 12.
Yes, there are many of them out there. But I'll tell you, the biggest problem is no early identification.
Yes.
In order to get a child assessed and to locate what is the learning barrier, you would need a whole team of people. You need the educational psychologists. You need them to go through the assessment process, etc. This is anywhere between 6 months to a year. And what I have found is that so many of us have that narrow-minded view that I have to get the National Senior Certificate, and that's only thing that means something. And from personal experience, I know of putting a child through that. And what is the most interesting thing is that the child always thinks there's something wrong with them.
Yes.
Why can't I concentrate? Why don't I understand? And when they go to the place where they get the right support, and that's all it is.
That's true.
In my case, I know of some kids that just needed different pacing. They just needed a slightly slower pace. But these are kids that leave somewhere being somebody, being something. And instead of being regarded as, oh no, I am sort of special needs or whatever, we don't talk about it nearly enough. And
it's shunned away in South Africa. It's almost like a taboo.
It's an absolute taboo because there's a lot of shame that
Why?
I, as a parent, what did I do wrong? Is this because of me? And yet, many times, if a problem is identified early, it often can improve. Many of them sometimes can end up going back into mainstream school or doing something else just because the problem was identified early, the support was given, and now they can get on their way. Because if we think of when they talk about the results of, when they say how many kids started grade 1, and then they look at 12 years later, and then it's like almost 200,000 less. I promise you, most of that is because no referral, a child can't cope, and everyone focuses on maybe the behavior or the act, and yet all they needed was the correct support. And that wasn't given, and hence why they end up leaving the system.
I even have a question where those students are, because every year we do get told 250,000, 300, but where are they? Nobody tracks to see where they are.
Nobody tracks to see where they are because, once they get to grade 9 and they get the exit school certificate, everyone just wants to get rid of the burden. That's how it is. You know what? I'm focused on matric results, and that is why it's such a big problem. This thing of I want to get 100% matric results means that I want to take all of the kids and make sure that they are not part of my cohort to show, beautiful results. Let's call it what it is. Let's support them. Let's get the help they need. Unfortunately, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time consuming, and it's often extremely expensive. And in the less fortunate schools, often access to the educational psychologists and going through the assessments almost inevitably hardly ever happens.
You've studied curriculum development. So when you look at our South African curriculum and the subjects that we have, are they adequate to nurture what the future is looking like in terms of workplace, technology, AI? Versus what our output from our grades 8 to 12?
I would say yes and no. I mean, basic maths, basic language skills are needed. But a lot of the subjects that are taken are assuming that as if there's only 4 careers in the world. You must do biology, you must do physical science. What about so many other things, that you should be doing that we don't offer? But we don't offer it because we don't have the skills. We don't have the teachers who can teach it. So instead of, giving them an optimal situation where they can grow, we then just say, hey, you know what? You've got these 6 choices. You better just take what's there. Because that's all we have.
So where does that leave us in the future? Jobs of the future, South Africa, the generation that's to come?
I fear for this generation. I fear for them because I worry that we give the impression that everything is okay. When we present those matric results, when we say there's an 80% pass rate, but I as a teacher know that out of the 100 learners I teach, at least 60 of them have some type of learning barrier that's not being addressed, and their marks are then being adjusted to push them through. Is that liberation? Is that what we fought for as a country? Or did we come here to really uplift our people so that that child can compete? And what I worry about is that outside the borders of here, I worry that they can't compete when pass levels are so low. And what happens is that so many kids are so used to not meeting pass requirements, but going to the next grade.
What is the pass mark? Is it 30%?
It is for certain subjects, but also what happens... Matric.
Is it 30?
Or
35?
Yeah, you can get 30, 35 for certain subjects.
So how do you pass?
You don't.
But they pass.
Your mark is then adjusted. So there's a sort of a a frame of anywhere between 5 to 10%. That then gets added onto that in order, because if we were to do it correctly, statistically, we would have too many kids remain behind.
But here we are, South Africa, we're sitting with a problem where our grade ones can't read or write when they get to grade 3. And then we still have I'm pretty sure it's 35% in matric.
It is.
And back then it was 40%, but you still needed to be on higher grade of some sort. But there is no higher grade, lower grade now,
So
is there?
what we've done now is, we used to have the very high matric results.
Yes.
So what we've done now is we've cascaded from the bottom, from the beginning of grade 1 up, and we've told teachers, you need to meet this target.
That's not good.
So in order to meet the target is to show continuity.
Yes. But you'll do anything to meet the target also.
Again, so if I then call a spade and say, you know what, most of my kids are not coping, then it's poor teaching. Because why are my kids not meeting the target? So once I personally have an issue with this target, not because kids shouldn't improve, but because it's almost a case of, you can see to be honest, it's got a political agenda to make the statistics look great. Because when we had those reading tests of the kids can't read for meaning, that's when it popped up. It was like, okay, so the kids are getting this, but then you take them to matric and now they're perfect. How did that happen? So then we just decided, okay, fine, let's set targets and then let's make sure that schools are meeting that.
How different is the workplace from now, workplace, to 2035 in your 2035 in your view?
Extremely different. We want to teach as if it's the old way, where you would stay at one job, you would get a degree, you would apply for 3 months, then you would stay there until you retire. But that was our grandparents, maybe some of our parents. But now it's, how adaptable am I?
Yes.
How relevant am I? How have I been upskilling myself? And upskilling doesn't necessarily always mean getting other degrees, but what skills have I tried to get so that I am on the cutting edge of things? Because we're living longer, retirement is getting earlier, but if you're not going to be relevant, what are you going to do? You can't rely on just the money that you get from your pensions anymore. You need to be almost more entrepreneurial.
So how important is it to teach the youth to be adaptable at such a young age when they are stuck in a rigid educational frame?
The rigid educational frame, yes, is there. And yes, there's nothing that I or many of my other colleagues can do about it. But again, it comes to, where's my passion? What am I doing to make it better? Am I just focusing on, again, is this a means to an end? Or do I really care about preparing my kids? Because I just want to say, a lot of parents, and I don't know if there's any parents who will be watching this, a lot of parents, you go to a restaurant now and a family sit down and everyone's on their cell phone.
No.
And nobody's talking. Now, when I talk to kids and I find out what's going on, I often hear things of, there's no connection. There's no, how are you? Are you okay? And that can't be manufactured. I can't ignore you for months and then come and say, hi, how are you? Are you well?
It needs to be consistent.
It needs to be
gradual.
consistent, because schools are not in isolation. We are community. And what happens in our children's home has a direct impact to how they are at school.
True.
And if parents aren't going to sometimes just take the time to say, you know what, let's have a meal together without an agenda. I'm not saying there needs to be a significant agenda, but where there's connection. Because I find one of the biggest things that are lacking today with the kids of today is connection. There's this gaping hole of, why don't you see me? Why don't you hear me? Are you listening? And hence, we're finding all these mental health issues with our young people.
And what skills will remain relevant and valuable regardless of the technological changes that are happening in education?
Good communication, critical thinking skills, adaptability, I feel that those are important things that irrespective of what happens, if you can communicate properly. And I mean, it lends itself to what I just said.
Yeah.
If I don't practice communicating, if you don't check the rationale of my thoughts, when I say, I feel like this, and you ask me probing questions, I'm learning to communicate. I'm learning to articulate myself. So all these little bits actually all connect, including what happens at home, what happens in the classroom, how I feel to connect, as well as how I'm preparing kids to be able to be out there and to communicate, to have these skills in the class.
Tania, what critical skills are we not developing enough, or we're not seeing more being done in schools?
We're not teaching kids how to learn. And when I say learn, learning is about creating connection. You cannot understand something in isolation if you don't understand how it relates to other things. And that requires a certain level of good basic knowledge, which then I'm able to apply and relate and critically connect. And that's one of the biggest things I think we need to look at, critical thinking skills. Letting kids learn how to question things and being open to that, letting them engage with content, wrestle with it, and not being afraid of perhaps not being the know-it-all, not being the person who knows all the answers, but encouraging inquiry, inquisitiveness, initiative.
Would that be if I have to ask you, what would be the 5 important skills one should have in the future? Would those be some of them?
Yes, absolutely. It definitely would be some of them. As I said, having good communication skills, having good critical thinking skills, being able to adapt, being able to, adjust to changes and things that happen, and not, sort of give up and be stifled because things didn't work out one way. How else can I fix this? What's the other way I can do it? Those types of things.
And how does one become future ready?
One becomes future ready, I don't think is a single faceted answer. I think it comes from a connection of things. If at home I'm talk about those things around the table or on a drive somewhere or something, where I've created a connection, where I'm able to have other conversations, where I'm able to understand the thinking. As same with what happens at school. We need to have time for our kids.
True.
We need to be able to listen to them and be able to allow them to have the space to ask these questions, to wrestle with it, so that we can grow in that way. Because let's be honest, nobody's going to honestly learn these things in a textbook and then do it.
No.
But I say, you know what? Look what mom's doing. I'm trying this, I'm trying that. This is how I'm experiencing. Oh, really? Because one day I would like to do something like that. Do you think that idea will work? You see, that then the conversation lends itself to it. So I think that's very, very important.
And one skill every young person should learn.
One skill, critical thinking, being able to question things and not being afraid to. But as I said, many times our school environment, beats that out of our kids because, it's uncomfortable. It's not compliant. It's not what I'm expected to do. So we need to move on. And, and then we stifle them. And then they're not sure, is my idea okay?
Yeah.
Does it make sense? What do you think? Et cetera, et cetera.
And one career that we're underestimating?
Educational technology. Because EdTech is going to become a big part of the future. And AI and teachers using AI as a tool to assist and to supplement curriculum, to supplement pacing timeframes or whatever. Again, the human, the teacher, is still central to that process, meaning the implementation of. And I think that is a big, big underestimate, especially here in SA so far.
I'd love to go to the next one, but how do we empower our teachers to be AI or technologically advanced or savvy when we go back to the question, they don't have resources.
Yes, but also what we do is we don't encourage excellence. What we encourage is compliance. In corporates, you guys have KPIs or whatever, There's no incentive for me to be better. If I get 5 out of 10 and you get 10 out of 10, we get the same increase. So, little things like that are discouraging. You don't sort of incentivize people in a way that matters to say, listen, you're important, you've got something valuable, thank you, this is how I'm rewarding you. So a lot of that comes to this case of let's treat everyone the same. And in so doing, it then doesn't encourage excellence. Because as I said, you are the best teacher. I'm not so great. I do the textbook teaching. I don't ask them how they are, but my increase is the same as yours.
Do you think we underestimate our educators?
100%. 100%. Teachers are spoken to as if... exactly, thank you. As if they are not professionals. And that professional autonomy has been taken away because...
Why do you think?
It's been taken away for a number of reasons. When we had OBE, there was a great deal of flexibility in the curriculum, all right, where I could pace my teaching X, Y, and Z. Then we had a case of some people not covering content, teachers not meeting basic compliance, all right? Then we brought in CAPS to say, hey, guess what? If I go to your school and you come to my school, you should be on the same work, on the same topic in the same week because we all follow the exact same recipe. Yes. But guess what? Of all the years of teaching, I've never met a new child from another school who has come in with the exact topic, the exact thing
in the same week.
In the same week. So, how are we doing this? And why are we trying to make it a one size fits all? But at the end of the day, we're saying to teachers, be inclusive, provide support. Now, that same teacher's thinking, well, when? How? When you're telling me if I don't meet this deadline, I'm not compliant. So why will I want to find support? It means that I would have to go much, much out of my way to do that, which, yes, many educators do. But you can understand the frustration, especially from the way policy is implemented in schools. And another big factor is that many of the departments don't speak to each other. So for instance, a curriculum is 12 weeks long. Yeah. But the marks will be due in the 10th week. So one system says you should be finished. The other one says you should still be busy. And then all of a sudden, everyone's quiet as to, so then what is the correct way? Should I not be, So there's a lot of poor communication between what is expected and what actually gets done. Because at the moment, we're very good at compliance. Every day is how compliant are you? Not how good are you? Did the kids understand the work? How creative were you? Did you imply critical thinking? That's nowhere on the criteria. The criteria talks about, how good is my subject file? Is everything dated? Is it pretty, so to speak? And to me, it's disheartening because that's not treating us as professionals. To me, then you might as well get us a manual and say, you know what, follow
the
it.
manual, yeah.
Why should I even set anything myself, seeing as you're dictating everything?
Now, one thing schools should start doing.
One thing schools need to start doing is looking at their leaders. We have a lot of good managers. We have a lot of good people who are good administrators, but they're not good leaders. They are good at keeping things the same, keeping the status quo, but not being innovative, not being entrepreneurial, not thinking of how can I make my school better in that way. And that is the one thing I think is sorely lacking in the leadership of many schools, is the fact that, I've been there for 30 years. I've always done my work really well. So hence, I think I'm the right fit for the job. That's not said on paper, but essentially, if you work in the system, you realize that we try to keep people who keep the status quo the same. And anyone who is not adjacent to that plan is generally not, included at the table.
And Tania, as we wrap it up, a 17-year-old is watching the podcast today. A 35-year-old is watching, listening to this conversation. What would their take home to their couch be?
I would say to them, believe in yourself. You are good enough. You are worthy. And use what you have. You are not your circumstances. You are not what has happened. Look forward. Keep looking at how you can do with what you have. And don't feel shame about the position that you're in. Rather say, this is where I am. This is where I intend to go. And I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to grow. And I'm going to develop myself in whatever way I can. I would definitely say that to a 17-year-old. And also to a 70-year-old, I'd say, you know what? Not every career is about being a doctor, lawyer, or accountant.
True.
Please stop that.
Stop it, South Africa.
Parents, hit this thing like as if there's only 5 careers or 6 careers.
That's it.
And other than that, there's nothing for you.
Yeah.
But I want to leave you with this. In every career, there are people who are average, who don't do anything significant. It's not the movies, okay? We don't all go to an office and have free coffee and an assistant take our jackets and,
I see you watch The Devil Watch.
Yes,
the Devil
and make a beautiful presentation and then you're up for a promotion.
Yeah.
You're going to have grit. Yeah. You're going to have determination. And you're going to have a good sense of self. And that's the one thing I'd say to the 35-year-old, if you have a child. Children need a good sense of self. If they know who they are, if they feel secure in them, they will not feel intimidated or, insecure about their circumstance. They need to know that they're enough and that they're worthy.
Tania, give me one misconception about AI.
That AI doesn't need human instruction, that the human connection is not required, but it does. And again, that's what makes it a tool, because what instructs it and what informs it is the human.
Yes.
And that part we shouldn't forget. You can't be an educator if you're not going to be open to being a continuous learner. And that's one of the big problems. I can't say I got my qualification 20 years ago and therefore I don't need to keep up with the times. I do need to move and move with the times, because the kids are changing. The kids I taught 10 years ago are not the same kids I teach today. So if I'm going to stick with my plan and say, well, it's a one size fits all, then I am going to have confrontation. Then I am going to have difficulty with the learners. I am going to have major discipline issues, etc., because I'm not connecting. I'm not being relevant. And it doesn't take anything away from your professionalism.
True.
And I think that's something we need to stop doing, is being scared of, you know what, here's this new thing, let's learn about it, let's be open to it, let's try it, and let's see how we can be better and improve.
All right, last question. If we're designing a school, we're in 2026, we're designing a school for 2040, what would we teach? What would we stop teaching completely? And what would we teach differently?
Okay, so I definitely think things like basic language and mathematical skills have to stay. They're the foundations of
what goes, I'm so curious, life orientation, what goes?
Oh, I was about to say that life orientation can definitely go.
Hello.
We put all these extra subjects in. And what I don't understand was 20, 30 years ago, we had them, but they were not examinable subjects.
Yeah.
Because you know what, life orientation is what we do every day. It's what we talk about. It's all the hidden curriculum that happens in between. And the funny thing is, to be honest, and maybe some teachers will agree or disagree, but I find many kids do the worst in those subjects. And yet they were meant to be the boosters. But boosters.
Why do we need to boost? But anyway, let me let you answer those 3 questions. Otherwise, we'll talk forever. Yeah. So you would stop teaching life orientation.
Yes.
What would we teach?
what would I teach? I think we need to have far more digital literacy and entrepreneurial skills. And not entrepreneurial skills that, again, are not current and relevant. Yes, we do teach entrepreneurial skills, but we teach it as if it's 50 years ago. And that's not how business works. That's not how commerce works. Yes, some basics are the same, but we need to be relevant. We need to talk about these things in the current hub of where finance and stuff is going.
And what would we teach differently?
I think when it comes to teaching things differently, I'd definitely say for the sciences, in the primary schools especially, and many high school teachers will attest to what I'm saying, there's not enough practical work. And that is where you ultimately learn science. You learn science by doing it, not reading it in the textbook. And what happens is that many primary schools don't have the resources or are not teaching it, in the practical sense. The kids hop to high school. Now all of a sudden we're doing it and it's a shock to the system. Now we fail physical science. Now we struggle with life science because the practical application is sorely missing. And the skills expertise in primary school. If you're a high school life science teacher, you have to know your story. You have to that is your subject. But in a primary school, we take you and then you teach this. You've never taught it before.
You're not an expert.
You're not an expert.
At the subject, yes.
You're not an expert. So what do? I then revert back to my compliance strategy.
As long as you've ticked the box.
Which is memorization, which is, many kids don't understand variables, for example. And variables are something that is beyond just science. It's everything. There's always an independent and dependent variable. And you need to understand how the two things connect and how we illustrate that mathematically to illustrating it visually and connecting all those dots, you see. Now, you'd ask most grade 7s, and I'll be honest with you, most high school kids are probably not sure what a hypothesis is either. But that's because the expertise are also lacking, as well as the practical application.
I think we need to talk about this in detail further. There's so much else to discuss, but we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You enjoyed it?
I did.
All right, so that's it. That's the end of our conversation today with Tania. And she's been really insightful with regards to AI in changing some of the rules. And you need to also remember at home that the future does belong to you, the people who are ready to learn and adapt. Whether you are a 17-year-old learner or a 35-year-old worker, I really hope that this episode helps you get closer to where you want to be in the future. Thanks for joining us, and catch us again in our next episode on the CLN Podcast. Goodbye.